Good morning. Today's daf is Daf Yomi 17. Begin by thanking the sponsors of the daf, Talmud Torah sponsors of the month, Shmuel Malka Esterson in memory of their parents and in commemoration of their yahrzeits, Yitzchak Laib ben Aharon HaKohen, Sarah Rachel bas Baruch Avraham, Hinda bas Henech Efraim, in honor of the Rav for all he does for our kehilla in the community. The neshama should have an aliyah, and the family should have an achama. And also a thank you to the sponsor Bill Eskin in honor of Chaim Rothschild. We're going to begin on the top of Daf Yomi Aleph at the two dots. And the Gemara over here is paraphrasing what it says in the Mishnah. The Mishnah went through the various different tefillos, the added brachos to the davening that they did on these various different Taanis that were added. And the Gemara writes, Al Rishona, who Omer Misha Ana es Avraham. So the Gemara says, Tana, Yesh machlifin tza'aka le'Eliyahu, utfilo l'Shmuel. In other words, if you're to go back to the Mishnah on Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph, the Gemara goes through Avraham, and we have Misha Ana Savosenu, and you have Zochar and you have Goel Yisrael, Misha Ana Esavosenu, and Zochar Neshkachos. Goes to Yoshua by Gilgal and says Shomea Trua. By Shmuel it says Shomea Tza'aka, and by Eliyahu it says Shomea Tefillah. In other words, the ending of the added bracha is different for the different people who are being mentioned. So the Gemara says that while in the Mishnah it says, when it came to Eliyahu, if you look back at the Mishnah, you'll see when it comes to Eliyahu, it says Shomea Tefillah. And when you look to Shmuel in the Mishnah, you'll see that it says Shomea Tza'aka, so Tefillah and Tza'aka. So says the Gemara, Tana yesh machlifin Tza'aka le'Eliyahu u'Tefillah l'Shmuel. Some switch it and do Tza'aka for Eliyahu and Tefillah for Shmuel. So the Gemara wants to know where do we get this from? Bishlama gabi Shmuel ksiv beit Tefillah ksiv beit Tza'aka. When it came to Shmuel, it said both. El gabi Eliyahu Tefillah ksiv Tza'aka lo ksiv. Doesn't say the word Tza'aka anywhere with regard to the Tefillos of Eliyahu. Eliyahu is referring to the story of Eliyahu Bahar Carmel, and we don't find anywhere where Eliyahu was davening and he used the word of Tza'aka. That's very interesting. There's many different lashonos of Tefillah that we use. Rav Shimshon Pinkus has a fascinating sefer, Sha'ar and B'Tefillah, and he goes through the various different types of Tefillah, Shevach, Hodah, and he goes through all the different types of the Saliyah, all the different terms that are used to refer to davening, and each one is very specific. So the Gemara wants to know, we don't find anywhere where the term Tza'aka is used with regard to Eliyahu. So the Gemara says, Aneni Hashem Aneni, when Eliyahu was davening, that ultimately his carbon should be accepted. He said, Aneni Hashem Aneni. He repeated the word Aneni a second time. The Gemara says that is a lashon of Tza'aka. That makes when you repeat a word, it's a lashon of Tza'aka, of crying out. I just think it's important to point out here for a minute that we see here that the Gemara is spending time trying to figure out, is Tza'aka the right word or is Tefillah the right word? When we end off the bracha, in other words, what's the difference? Why are we so concerned about what the end of the bracha is? And I think it's important to note what it says in Shulchan Aruch, actually the Mishnah Brura. Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Aleph, the title of the Siman is Shetzarach Lechavim B'chol HaBrachos V'shiyachol Lehispalel B'chol Lasha. Person should have kavana with all the brachos, and a person is allowed to daven to Hashem in any language. And that's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. It says in Sif Dalid, Yachol Lehispalel B'chol Lasha Sheyirtz. A person can daven in any language that he wants. And the Shulchan Aruch goes through a bunch of different opinions, whether it's talking about even a yachid, or it's talking about a tzibor. Ultimately, the Mishnah Brura writes that a person is better off davening in Lashon HaKodesh. I'm going to read you what the Bir Halacha writes here in Siman Kuf Aleph. He writes, V'chazal amr b'Lashon HaKodesh nivra olam, d'chsiv lezos yikari isha, k'mi ishtu kachazos. And he goes on to say, is previously, Vatam, ki Lashon HaKodesh Yesh lo segulos rabos Michoel lashonos. A person who davens Lashon HaKodesh, there's a lot of segulos built into the actual words of the davening. V'hu lashon she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaber bo im neviav. It's the language that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses to daven with the neviim. Ramban, he goes on to a whole explanation about the value of davening in Lashon HaKodesh. And I should just point out, I always tell people, and I talk to people about tefillah, that a person should find a place in their davening to talk to Hashem in English. Because you understand it, it comes from your heart. You could simply just talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about your day. You could end off at some point in your Shemon Esrei or a specific bracha where it's relevant to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu about your day, and just add something in and talk about either thank you for this or please can you help me with that. But even for somebody who has a difficult time necessarily relating with the actual words of the davening, read the actual words of davening, because we see, and specifically in this Gemara, the Gemara is figuring out, should we use the word tza'aka or should we use the word tefillah? It's because it makes a difference and it's more relevant. And we're using Eliyahu Navi, we're using Shmuel, we're talking about all these previous Nevi'im who we're relying on for their schos for our tefillos. And the Gemara wants to know, is it more appropriate to use the word tza'aka or the word tefillah? We see how careful Chazal were when they worked out the lashonos of our davening to make sure that it has the best framework to be niskabel by Hashem. So we don't want to ever jeopardize that ability to be able to use Lashon HaKodesh to be able to tap in to those kavanas that Chazal had when they taught us how to daven. So even if we don't necessarily relate with it, don't necessarily understand it, what the Mishnah Berurah here and Biur Halacha is teaching us from the Ramban is that there's so much within those words that actually help our tefillos go up to the place where they're supposed to be. It doesn't mean you shouldn't add in words from your own heart, but of course you should. And this Gemara again specifies to us whether or not that lashon of tza'aka or that lashon of tefillah, literally the last word in the bracha, which word is better? It highlights how careful Chazal were in coining the words of the brachas. The Mishnah continues, Al shishis hu omer misha anas Yona, al shvius hu omer misha anas David. So again, on the added sixth bracha, it says misha anas Yona. On the seventh bracha, it says misha anas David. The Gemara says, Mechdi, Yona basar David or Shlomo have. Historically, Yona lived after David and Shlomo. So why are we giving him a bracha beforehand? So my time makdim liberation. Why are we making his bracha first? The Gemara says, Mishum debaylu michtam merachim al haaretz. We wanted to end off the bracha with merachim al haaretz. And Rashi says over here, you can see debaylu michtam besof kol habrachos. At the end, we wanted to end off Baruch merachim al haaretz. We needed David Shlomo to be within that bracha. Why shehein hispalu al Eretz Yisrael? Number one, they davened for Eretz Yisrael. And number two, inami mishum deinu tikun beis hamikdash to ikar haaretz. They were the ones who actually did the work to prepare the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Again, all these fast days had to do with the land of Eretz Yisrael. If we're going to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're requesting for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us for the land of Eretz Yisrael, we want to end off with David and Shlomo because they were so fundamental and they played such a crucial role in building what is the most important part of Eretz Yisrael, which was the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore we went out of historical order in order to get them in. So like this, we can end off with Merachim al Aretz. Tan Mishum Sumchas, we learned in the name of Sumchas, Sumchas Amru, in the name of Sumchas, they said that the last bracha was not Merachim al Aretz, rather it was Baruch Mashpil Haramim. The bracha was Mashpil Haramim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings down very lofty and high people. So Rashi says over here, Mashpil Haramim, Hayu Omer b'makum Baruch Merachim shehichniam b'mater sheshava b'tshuva. We wanted people to end off realizing that sometimes something so basic like rain, which you take for granted, this has literally changed the lives of all of Klal Yisrael. They're having so many fast days, there's so many different tefillas. Why? Because of rain. In other words, all these people who were so high up there, ultimately they were brought down. They came down a little bit from where they were because of the rain. So we say Baruch Mashpil Haramim. Now, why exactly this is such a wonderful thing to end off with? The Rishonim talk about it, but I think the simple understanding is that the whole point of when HaKadosh Baruch Hu does anything to Klal Yisrael, to cause us to come to extra fast days or to extra tefillos, is sometimes we have to get down a little bit. We have to recognize we're not the ones who run the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. And sometimes when it comes to things that we expect to be such a crucial part of our life, we expect them to always be there. And something like rain, which we just need for our survival, that has the ability to be able to bring us down a little bit. And that's such an important thing to end off with, because at the end of the day, after all the tefillos, if you don't take anything from it, at least you'll remember, Mashbil Haramim, that look, we were all high up there, we felt so good about ourselves, but we realized something so simple like this can happen to change us, and that's an important lesson to take away with it. Tanu Rabbanan, Mipnei Ma Amru Anshe Mishmar, I'm sorry, just go back. Shalosh Taanis Rishonos Anshe Mishmar Misanin, V'lo Mashlimin. So the Mishnah told us that in the first 3 fasts, the Anshe Mishmar would fast, V'lo Mashlimin, they would not finish this. The Gemara goes on, Mipnei Ma Amru, the Gemara is really focusing on the later line of the Mishnah. Mipnei Ma Amru, Anshe Mishmar Mutaron Lishtos Yayin Belelos, Avalo B'Yamin. This is really a side point in the Mishnah, that again, you have the Anshe Mishmar, were the people who were called to that shift of that week. They weren't necessarily all on duty the entire week, but they were part of the shift who was there that week. And then the Bati Avos were those who were actually within that family that were working that day. So the halacha is, Anshe Mishmar Mutaron Lishtos Yayin Balelos, Avalo B'Yamin. The Anshe Mishmar could drink wine at night, but not during the day. Why? Because we're concerned maybe there'll be too much work for that group to take care of. And they'll be called in as backup to be there to serve as the backup kohanim who are going to have to work. Now, a kohen who drank wine, who's drunk, is not allowed to do avoda. So they always have to be in tip-top shape just in case they get called in. So they're there that week, and their group is going to be serving that week, even though they know it's not their day, but they can't drink wine during the day because it could be that they'll get an emergency phone call and say, listen, we have very high volume here in the Beis HaMikdash, and our group was not properly prepared to deal with all the people who are here, all the karbanos, all the avodah that has to be done, and therefore we need to call in some backup, and then you say, sorry, I'm not available to come, I just had a drink of wine. So therefore we say they can't drink during the day, they have to be prepared to go in. Why is it that the people of the Beis Av can't drink during the day or at night? Why? Because they're always busy. In other words, they have to always be available, even if it's a slow day in the Beis HaMikdash, and they're kind of relaxing and waiting for some people to come in. Nevertheless, they can't drink because at any moment's notice, they have to be available to be able to do avodah. And if they're going to be intoxicated, they won't be able to do the avodah. The Gemara says, "Mikan amru kol kohen shemaker mishmarto." If there's a kohen, even bisman hazeh, Rashi says, even bisman hazeh, if a kohen knows which mishmeres he was part of, umishmeres beis av, and not only that, they also knew which day from that mishmeres they were part of. Mishmeres beis av shalo v'yodea shabati avos kavuim. We also know that their family was kavua. Rashi has 2 different understandings of what this means. Either it means that they simply know that they had a kavua date. It's possible that not every family had a kavua date. There are some families that they knew this was our date, our week to be there. So it has to be, they know which mishmeres they're from. They have to also know which day in the week they served as part of their family. And on top of that, they have to know that their family actually had a kavua date. The halacha is, Asr lishtos yain kol hayom. That day they can't drink wine. Why? Because Beis HaMikdash can be built any day. So if they're going to drink wine on their day, what happens if the Beis HaMikdash is built today? They're going to be drunk, won't be able to pull up and do their work. The Gemara continues, B'makar mishmarto, they recognize which mishmeres they are part of. Ve'ein makar mishmeres beis av, so they know which family, so which week they're serving, but not which day. So what's the halacha? The Yodea Shabbat Avos Kavuim. They know that they had a set time. Halacha is Kavuim Sham Asr Lishtos Yain Kolos Shabbos. They can't drink wine that whole week. It's very difficult, but 1 week a year, these Kohanim are going to have to just put down the alcohol, put down the wine, no drinking that week, because Meretz Hashem from here of Yemeinu, the Beis Mikdash is going to be built, and if it's built during that time, what's going to happen if you're called to duty that day and you're drunk? What a shame and what a waste. So therefore, they're not able to drink. They're not able to drink wine that whole week. Eino makir mishmarto umishmeres beisav shalo. So he doesn't know which mishmeres he's part of or which family. The odea shabbat diavos kavu and sham, but they do know that they have historically in their family that they had a kavu, a date. What's the halacha? Asar lishtos yain la'olam. They can never drink wine because the Beis Mikdash might be built, and if it's built, who knows when their date is. That's right. Yeah. Asar lishtos yain kol hashana. They can't drink wine the whole year. Rabbi says, Omer ani, I say, Asar lishtos yain la'olam. They can't drink, skip the line. They can't drink wine ever. Aval ma'asa. What am I supposed to do? Shetakanaso kilkalaso. In other words, preparing themselves to be able to be ready to do avodah is actually the kilkal. Why? Because Rashi explains that the Beis Mikdash has not been built in a very long time. If you look, takanaso kilkalaso. So there is a bit of a change of the words. But at the end of Rashi, Rabbi Omer, he says, Shatakanaso kilkalaso, Davi kama shanim shlechazr bira, the kilkalazu takanaso, lishtos hayayin behedya, l'shem yibana lechashina. In other words, ultimately the fact that Beis Mikdash was not built in a long time, it's a huge kilkal that it's not here, but the bottom line is, that actually allowed the Kohanim to drink wine, because we're not necessarily choshesh that it's going to be built today. In other words, it's a very sad thing, but my understanding of this is that it's a gzeira she'ein rov etzir b'chol na'amad ba. You can't make a gzeira that people are just not going to be able to hold on to. There always needs to be some type of end to a gzeira. If you're just going to say, again, away from Mashiach every single day, we're waiting for the Binyan Beis Mikdash every single day of our lives, but again, you go to a group of people and tell them, it's going to be grape juice from now on, no more Kiddush. It's going to be a very difficult thing, and they're not going to be able to hold on to it, and therefore they're not going to listen. So therefore, to be choshesh that the Beis Mikdash will be built, and therefore to tell Kohanim they can't drink, that's something Chazal did not do. That's the way I'm understanding this Rashi and this line of Rebbe, that he ultimately allowed them to drink just because it was not built yet. The Gemara asks Amar Abaya, Kaman shasu idna. According to whom are they drinking today? Because we don't know. Most Kohanim, as far as I'm aware, don't know when they're supposed to be serviced, so they wouldn't be able to drink. Kaman shasu ha'idna kahani chamra. How are the Kohanim drinking wine today? Karebi, they're relying on Rebbe. Ultimately, Kohanim today who drink wine, it's because they rely on Rebbe. The Gemara continues. Anshi mishmar v'anshi maimen asrum l'saper l'chabes b'chamishi mutarin. In other words, the Anshe Mishmar, those who are serving that week, it is Asor L'Saper U'Lechabes. They can't wash their laundry or take a haircut. B'Chamishi, on the Thursday beforehand, Mutar B'nei Kavod HaShabbos. On the Thursday they could because of Kavod Shabbos. The Gemara asks my time, why can't they take a haircut? Why can't they wash the laundry? I'm a rabbi Baruch and this is the concept we actually see on Chol Hamoed as well, is that we want people to make proper preparations in advance. And therefore we tell them, don't wait until the last possible minute to take a haircut or the last possible minute to wash your clothing. So you tell them, this whole week, you're going to have to refrain from washing laundry and taking a haircut. So therefore they say, you know what? If I'm going to have to take a break for a whole week, you line up and get a haircut beforehand to make sure that you're going to look proper. In other words, the whole idea is that they should walk into their mishmar. They're going with it's their 1 week, perhaps their 1 day that they're going to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. We want them to come in looking all proper and properly groomed, and therefore we tell them to take care of that in advance. Don't do it during the week. Now the Gemara goes on, a bit of a tangent over here, talking about the halachas of haircuts. Tana Banan, Melech mistaper b'chol yom. King takes a haircut every single day. Kohen Gadol, Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. The Kohen Gadol takes a haircut once a week on Erev Shabbos. Kohen Hedyot, a regular Kohen, simple Kohen, Achas l'shoshim yom, he takes a haircut once every 30 days. Now the Gemara goes back. Melech Mustafa b'chol yom ma'itayma. Why does the king take a haircut every single day? Amar Rabbi Abba bar Zavda Amar Kra Melech b'yofyo techazena inecha. A melech is representing all the people, has to always look proper. So therefore, he takes a haircut every day. I don't know that there was much to cut every single day, but again, if you cut the hair every single day, you never have that day when the hair looks overgrown, and therefore the Kohen takes a haircut every single day. He's the Melech, he's representative of all of Klal Yisrael, and therefore he always has to look proper. Kohen Gadol, Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, by Taima. Why does the Kohen Gadol have to take a haircut every Erev Shabbos? Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Shmuel bar Yitzchak says, Hayol mishmaros mischachos, because every single week, as we explained, you have a new mishmar who comes in, and therefore it's proper that when they come in to see the Kohen Gadol, he should look proper. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says the mishmaros mischachos b'chol Shabbos v'Shabbos u'mishmara shelo ra'asahu ad achshav, a new group that comes in who's not seen it up until now, u'balar oso, they come to see him, hadavar na'a shetireu b'yofyo. Imagine the new group of Kohanim come in, and they see the Kohen Gadol, and he doesn't look appropriate, he doesn't look good, he doesn't have a haircut, he's looking a little bit sloppy. So therefore, we want that every time when a new group comes in, the Kohen Gadol looks perfectly groomed. Kohen Hedyot, Achas l'shoshim yom. Kohen Hedyot takes a haircut once every 30 days. Minalan, where do we know this from? Asya para minazir. We learned the word Gzera Shava. It says para by a Nazir as well as it says by a Kohen. Where? Ksiv hacha v'roisham lo yigalechu upera lo yishlachu. Their heads, this is talking about a Nazir, where they should not shave their heads, they should not cut their long hair. Ksiv hasam, it says here by a Kohen, kadosh yeh gadol para sar rosho. Mala alon shloshim, afkan shloshim. Here the pasuk also says that kadosh yeh and gadol para sar rosho, and it says para in both places. Mala alon shloshim yom, just like by a Nazir it's for 30 days. So to here, the opposite, he should take a haircut every 30 days. The Nazir gufei minalan, Nazir, it's himself. It doesn't say anywhere in the pasuk anything about 30 days. So where do we know that a Nazir can't take a haircut for 30 days? Amar of Masna Stam Nazirus Shloshim Yom. A Stam Nazir is for 30 days. Gemara says, thank you very much. But Minala, where do we know this from? In other words, we understand that a Nazir is for 30 days. We know that a Stam Nazir is for 30 days. But where do you know that from? So here the Gemara gives a very interesting answer. I can't say that I know all of HaShas, but I'm not familiar with that many Gemaras that actually gives an answer like this. The Gemara says, Amar Kra Yiyah. The word over there is Yiyah. If you have the pasuk on the side, you'll see it's the last pasuk on the page. It says, Kadosh Yiyah Gadel Para Sa'arosho. It says the word Yiyah, Bigematria Tlasin. The word Yiyah has the numeric value of 30. Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Yud is 10, Hey is 5. So 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5 is 30. So the Gemara says we learned from the word Yiyah that it is a Stam Nazir is for 30 days. It's a very interesting answer. It's not the Baal Turim, it's the Gemara. And the Gemara is actually teaching us a halacha, a real halacha from a gematria. So Yiyah begematria tlasin havi. Amar papa labaya. V'dama hachi kamar. Maybe we're learning the other way around. Hachi kamar achmano loy lirbu klal. Maybe he can't actually grow it at all. So who says that it can be once every 30 days? Maybe he can't grow it at all. Amar le ihaviksiv lo yishtachu para kedika amrit. If it would say you should not allow the para to grow, then yes, you'd be right. You can't grow it at all. Hashdiksiv upera lo yishlechu. You should not allow the para to grow long. So para lahavi shluchi hud delilishlechu. In other words, he's allowed to have hair, but he can't grow it out. So a Kohen takes a haircut once every 30 days. Why is it not true now? So the Gemara says, it's the same thing as shtuya yayin. In other words, the question is, maybe now also the Kohanim should have to make sure that they cut their hair exactly on schedule. It's only a problem when they're actually on duty to go to work. The same thing is true here when they're not actually working in the Beis HaMikdash, because you don't have a Beis HaMikdash, then he doesn't have to worry about it. But Tanya Rabbi Omer, we learned before, Rabbi Omer, Ani Kohanim Asurum Lishtos Yayin La'olam. Kohanim can't drink wine ever. And Rabbi said, in other words, we're quoting Rebbe, who says that he was the one who really, in other words, from a real technical point of view, Kohanim can't drink wine ever. But according to him, he was the only one who said they're allowed to drink wine because, in other words, takanasa kilkalas, as we said, their takana came from the fact that we have a kilkel that there's no Beis HaMikdash. It's Karebi. Michoel Rabbanan Asri, according to Rabbanan, it's going to be Asr. In other words, the Gemara is saying, very nice, that we ultimately allowed Kohanim to drink wine nowadays. Why do we allow them to drink wine? Rely on Rebbe. But does that mean that there's no Rabbanan? The Gemara is saying, according to the Rabbanan, who disagree with Rebbe, the Rabbanan would be of the opinion that Kohanim cannot drink wine nowadays. So if that's the case, if Kohanim cannot drink wine nowadays, they should also be forced to follow the schedule and make sure they're always taking haircuts every 30 days. So my time up. Meheri Yibana Beis HaMikdash. Immediately, very quickly, the Beis HaMikdash will be built. Ubi'inan Kohen Haroi Lavoda. We need to have a Kohen who's Roi for Avoda. In other words, the Kohen needs to be ready, properly prepared, on the spot, ready to go. V'lekib, we won't have it. In other words, according to the Rabbanan, the Gemara is ultimately asking, why don't we force the Kohanim to follow their schedule? So the Gemara gives a simple answer. Hacha efsher d'mistaper v'ayil. How long does it take to take a haircut? Mashiach comes, quickly just pull out the haircut machine and get a haircut. Maybe you won't get the nicest one if you're in a big rush, but you'll get to do avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. Just take a haircut. The Gemara says, Ihachi, if so, shtui yayinami, someone who drank wine also. There's also a way to get out of it. Efsher, digani porta. V'ayil, he can take a little bit of a nap. Then he'll take a little nap and he'll be fine. K'derami bar Abba, like Rabbi bar Amma told us, Amar Rabbi bar Abba, derech mil v'sheina, person walks a mil, which is approximately 18-minute walk, not that long. V'sheina, and a little bit of sleep. V'sheina kol shehu, and a little bit of sleep. Mefigenes hayayin. Ultimately, it dilutes the ability of the wine's ability to intoxicate you. Where it says, Lav mitmar Allah. Have we not said about that? Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Lo Shanu Ela Kishashasa Shir Revias. That only works to take a little nap and take a little walk if all you drank was Revias, which is somewhere between 3 and 5 ounces. Aval Shasa Yosim Revias. Person drank more than a Revias. We're talking about a guy who had a nice drink of wine. Kol Shekain Shederach Matri Dosa. It's the other way around. Walking around actually makes the wine, I guess, circulate a little bit more, and therefore makes him. It has a stronger effect. The shena and sleep and shakraso, a little short nap actually makes him more inebriated. In other words, it doesn't always work. The problem with a Kohen doing avodah is if he drank more than a revius. If you drank more than a revius, so then this solution is not going to work. So, in other words, the bottom line is that when it comes to taking a haircut, we have a simple solution: take out a scissors and get a haircut. When it comes to someone who drank wine, we don't always have an immediate solution to fix their wine problem to be able to prepare them to be ready to do avodah. And therefore, that's why we're much more careful about Kohanim not drinking wine at a time that they're supposed to be serving than not having a haircut. But ultimately, it's just worthwhile pointing out, we see how this whole Gemara is going out of its way to tell Kohanim to get ready. They have to be ready. So now ultimately, we couldn't say Kohanim can't drink wine forever. But the Chavetz Chaim, he would give Musar all the time to Kohanim. He wrote a Sefer, Likuti Halachas. It's the Likuti Halachas, which is written on Seder Kachim. And he did so much in his life to prepare, to make sure people are aware of all the halachos. And he used to encourage people to learn Kachim. He would encourage Kohanim specifically. He would say to them, listen, you have a job waiting for you. You can't just be ignorant. You're going to pull up there and have no idea what to do. So on a very basic level, even if we won't tell Kohanim that they can't drink wine, even if we don't tell Kohanim they have to follow very strict schedule of when to get haircuts. I'm not a Kohen, but I still think it's very important for people, for the Kohanim amongst us, that we should have a Seder Kachim for the Kohanim over here to be prepared, because Mehera, Yibana Beis HaMikdash, and we're going to need our Kohanim, our representatives of our shul, to be ready to go. Another answer the Gemara gives as to why when it comes to taking a haircut, we're not makbid now to make sure that the Kohanim have their haircuts on time. Rav Ashi Amar, Shishtuya Yayin, the Mechali Avoda, Gazru Burabanan. If a Kohen does Avoda while he is under the influence, the Avoda is pasul. It's done. Pruei Rosh, Lo Mechali Avoda, Lo Gazru Burabanan. Rav Ashi says there's a huge fundamental difference between the two of them. Of course, we don't want a Kohen showing up to work with long hair. But it's not ma'akev. It's not going to make the Avoda is pasul. But a Kohen shows up drunk, the Avoda is pasul. So there's a huge difference, and that's why we could allow Kohanim to be on a different schedule of getting a haircut, but we could be more makbid about drinking wine. Gemara says, Meisvei, ve'elu shehein b'misa. The following are punishable by misa. Shtuya yayin, b'pruei rosh. So we see that shtuya yayin is included, shtuya yayin as well as pruei rosh are included. Bishlam b'shtuya yayin b'hediksiv. The Gemara wants to know where do we know this from. Shtuya yayin b'hediksivu. It says in the pasuk, yayin v'shecher al teisht. It's interesting, the Gemara brings the pasuk of yayin v'shecher al teisht, but doesn't actually bring the words in the pasuk that are relevant here. If you have a Gemara that has the pasuk on the side, see it's the first pasuk in the Torah are, and it says, yayin v'shecher al teisht, ata uvanecha itach b'vo achem al oel moed, v'lo samusu. It says clearly, if you follow this, you don't drink wine, then v'lo samusu. Clearly it indicates that it's punishable by misa for somebody who a Kohen shows up drunk to work. Ela pruei rosh minala d'chsev v'rosham lo yigalechu upera lo yishlachu uksiv basrei v'yayin lo yishtu kol Kohen b'voim al achatzer penimis. This is actually a pasuk in Yecheskel, but in the pasuk in Yecheskel it actually has both. It has v'rosham lo yigalechu as well as v'yayin lo yishtu. So the Gemara says, v'iskosh pruei rosh l'shtuya yayin. Pruei rosh and shtuya yayin are both written in the same pasuk. Ma shtuya yayin b'misa, just like a Kohen who shows up to do avoda under the influence of alcohol is b'misa. Af pruei rosh, the Kohen who does not have a proper haircut shows up to work is b'misa. The Gemara says umina. And where do you know that from? Ima shtuya yayin to mechali avoda. How could you make such a hekesh? Shtuya yayin is mechali avoda. It ruins the avoda. Pruei rosh mechali avoda. I'm sorry, no. The Gemara is not. That's not the Gemara's question. The Gemara's question is maybe we should say that it also is mechal the avoda. Maybe we should say that both mechal the avoda. The Gemara says lo. Now I have to point out that the Bach takes out this line over here in the parentheses over here. I'm not sure why. He wants to just replace it with a kasha to say maybe we should indeed learn that pruei rosh should be mechal the avoda. But again, I think the Gemara reads very nicely by saying, lo ki iskish lemisa hu de iskish, aval lachuli avoda lo iskish. The hekish only goes so far as to say that there's misa, but not to say that the avoda is going to be pasul. Amalei reveal Rav Ashi, hamikamed das Yecheskel. This halacha came before Yecheskel. In other words, the Gemara is asking just a basic fundamental question when it comes to a hekish that we find in Devrei Kabbalah, which is outside of the Torah. In other words, this is in Nach, this is in the Nevi'im. So this halacha was true before Yecheskel came around. So if this halacha was true before Yecheskel came around, how do we learn the halacha from a hekesh in Yecheskel? The halacha predates Yecheskel. Siman Amra, Amrle Lutamech Hadam Rav Chista. There's another halacha with regard to Rav Chista. Davar Zeh Mitoras Moshe Lo Lamad. Midiri Kabbalah Lamadnu, and what's he talking about? Kol Banechar Orel Laib for Orel Basel Yavo Mikdashi. He's talking about the halacha that an Orel, someone who does not a Kohen without a bris milah, cannot come to the base of Mikdash. So Amikama Da'asi Yecheskel Man Amra. Before Yecheskel came around, who said that halacha? Ela Gemara Gamir La V'Asi Yecheskel V'Asmecha Akra. This was the halacha that they had learned all the way back from Moshe Rabbeinu. And Yecheskel came and he actually wrote it in a way where it can be placed into a pasuk. Hachanami Gemara Gomer La V'Asa Yecheskel V'Asmecha Akra. The Gemara taught it to us with this halacha we know from Moshe at Sinai, but he actually put into a pasuk. It's very interesting. This is an important line to understand. It comes from the Gemara. The Ritva Maseches Rosh Hashanah is a very famous Ritva. He talks about it in a smachta. We find throughout the Torah, throughout the Gemara uses the term asmachta ba'almahu. It's an asmachta, and not referring to a asmachta with regard to the halachas of Chosh and Mishpat. An asmachta means that the pasuk is an asmachta. We learn it from a pasuk. And the Ritva writes, lest you think that we just shoved anything we want into any pasuk, even though it's not the original intent of the pasuk. Anytime we have an asmachta, it works like this. The halacha was taught to us from Moshe Rabbeinu. We know the halacha to be true. Kadosh Baruch Hu taught it to us. It's like any other din midiraisa, he writes. But Kadosh Baruch Hu left room for Chazal to be able to put it into a pasuk. And here we have where Yecheskel actually incorporated the words into a pasuk, but again, it's no less a halacha than anything else. The Mishnah goes on and continues, Kol HaKasav Megillas Taanis lo lemisped lefanav asur la'achrav mutter. Megillas Taanis was a Megillah, a sefer that was written and had all the days that we shouldn't have. They're really different Yom Tovim, different celebrations, so they weren't actually established as a Yom Tov in Klal Yisrael. Nevertheless, these were days that they did not establish fast days on those days. And then we see also that they didn't give Hespedim. Tana Rabbanan, Ilain Yoimaya Delo Lis'ana Bahom. These are days you can't fast on. Umiktsasson Delo Misped Bahom. Some of them also, you do not give a hesped, you do not eulogize in those days. What are these? Mireish Yarcha de Nisan, from Rosh Chodesh Nisan, V'ad Temanya Bey, until the 8th day of it. Why? Because Itukam Tami. The Rashi explains that the Tzedukim, they darshan from the pasuk as Karbani Lach Mili Ishai, that a carbon tamid came from private funds of Yechidim. But really, we know the halacha is supposed to come from the communal funds. The Tzedukim insisted it comes from Yechidim. But ultimately, we were able to be menatzeach, to win over them with the argument as the pasuk goes on later on, and it says in a Lashon Rabim, so they gave it. If you see Rashi in Mereish Yach Denisa, and he says, Tzedukim Omrim, Yachid Misnadev Umevi Tamid, my Darash, what did they darshin? Es a keves echot tasa beboker versus a keves hasheni tasa ben aboker. Maya hadrule es karbani lach mili ishai tishmeru lahakriv. So they read the pasuk further, and they ultimately disproved the argument of the Tzedukim, and therefore the Lol Misped Bahon, we don't say Espedim, mitamnebe from the 8th day ad sof moada till the end of Pesach. What happened then? Itosov Chagah de Shavua. They were able to argue down the argument of Shavuos. We know that Tzedukim wanted to insist that Shavuos should always be on a Sunday. Now we know that even though it says Mimachar HaShabbos, it doesn't mean Mimachar HaShabbos in literal sense, which means Sunday. It's the day after the beginning of Yom Tov. So, Delo Misped Bahon, Amar Mar, Mereish Yacha de Nisan, Ad Tamanya Be Itukam Tamida, Delo Misped Lamali, Delo Misped Lahon, Delo Misped. They should not say Espedim. So Lamali, why do we have to say that halacha that they should not say Espedim then? Mereish Yarcha, Lamali Mereish Yarcha, Lema Mitrei Ben Nisan. Why do you have to talk about the first day of Chodesh Nisan? Why don't we just talk about the second day? Because Rosh Chodesh Gufei, Yom Tov, Rosh Chodesh already is a Yom Tov. In other words, you don't have to include that, it's already Rosh Chodesh. V'asr, and it's already asr to fast on that day and to give espedim. Amar Rav, lo nitzucha el lesser yom shalafanav. We have to include it because the halacha is we always include the day beforehand. So we have to include it to make Erev Rosh Chodesh also a day that we're not going to fast. V'shalafanav nami typically devi le yom shalafnei Rosh Chodesh. Why don't we just say it's the day before Rosh Chodesh? Where it says Rosh Chodesh do'raisahu u'do'raisa lo b'chizik. Rosh Chodesh is do'raisa. Now, it's interesting to point out. Yes, of course, the concept of Rosh Chodesh is do'raisa. It's not 100% clear that the isser to fast or the isser to say espedim is midoraisa. Just throw that in parenthetically. The Gemara ultimately is saying that Rosh Chodesh is a do'raisa concept. and therefore doesn't need chizik. And this is a concept we find in many different places when it comes to Yisurim Midoraisa, that we ultimately don't need to have that much chizik. When it comes to a din derabanan, we have to sometimes actually add some chizik to it. Deraisa Laib by chizik. The Tanya, for we learned in the Raisa, Hayamim ha'ela ksuvim Megillas Taanis lifneim ulachreim asurim. These days that are written in Megillas Taanis, the day before and afterwards are asur. Shabbos is Yom Tovim hein asurin. Those days actually are asur. However, lifneim ulachreim mutarim. Before and afterwards are going to be mutar. Umahefresh bein zelazeh. What's the difference? Why is it that the days of Megillas Taanis have the dates before and afterwards, which are also but not when it comes to Shabbos and Yom Tov? Why? Because halalu divrei Torah ain't tzrichin chizuk. Which things which are midoraisa, people understand the importance of those days. Therefore, we don't need to enforce them the day beforehand and the day afterwards. Halalu divrei sofrim. These days are divrei sofrim tzrichin chizuk. Divrei sofrim need to have chizuk. We'll stop here. But I think it's just important to point out today's Chanukah. And Chanukah obviously is a Yom Tov which is B'divrei Sofrim. And Baruch Hashem, we don't need so much chizuk to eat donuts and latkes and to enjoy our Chanukah. But sometimes we do need some chizuk to remember that it's Chanukah. It's a Yom Tov. We go about our daily lives over Chanukah. We go to work over Chanukah. For the most part, some of our lives could look identical to every other day of the year. It's a day which is midrabanan. There's no Isra Malach on Chanukah, besides for the time when the candles have to be lit. But even then, it's only for some people. So it's kedai for us to realize that although there are no halachas which we are required to do over Chanukah, but ultimately the bottom line is, if it's a Yom Tov which is Medivrei Sofrim, it's the first day of Chanukah, we have an opportunity to be able to be mechazek, whatever way it could be mechazek, learning over Yom Tov, or whatever it is. There's an opportunity for us to be able to be mechazek Yom Tov, which is Medivrei Sofrim. Have a wonderful day. Have Freilich and Chanukah.